voices behind modern gacha games, because they are, simply put, insane. From manipulative microtransactions to habit-forming retention mechanics to the exploitation of their own passionate communities, anime gambling is the tip of the iceberg here. I find the last half-decade of gacha progression to be especially interesting as the genre continues to expand beyond the mobile market into the spotlight of a medium still struggling with valid claims of addiction, and one where regulation is essentially non-existent. I also want to explore what this normalization might mean for new generations of gamers and the future of the industry. Because, like, how in the world did Genshin Impact become the fucking blueprint? As I started work on this video, I began asking around for sources on addictive game design, while simultaneously reading research papers on gacha games, and one book just kept coming up.
Addiction by Design is fantastic.
Shul provides further insight.
Shul.
Yo, would you recommend this book?
Oh yeah, extremely.
The strange thing is, I was trying to write about video games, but this book is about machine gambling in Las Vegas. For those unfamiliar with gacha games, here's the elevator pitch. They can exist in many different genres, but are defined by a system where major gameplay elements like characters and weapons are locked behind rotating banners, where players spend premium currency earned by playing the game or through in-app purchases on a chance to unlock new content. Also, I'm going to mainly reference Hoyoverse titles in this video for two reasons. One, all of their recent games are heavy hitters that have redefined global perception of gacha. And two, they're the games I've spent the most time playing and analyzing, and they all share similarities that other studios are beginning to use as templates.
Canta el ritmo de las ofertas en Amazon.
When talking about gacha games, it's important to make the distinction that they are not gambling. While gacha pulls and loot boxes do share similarities with slot machines, especially considering their flashy visuals and dynamic audio in response to jackpots, pulls are over in a matter of seconds and only make up a tiny piece of the time you spend playing the video game. Whether we're talking about casual collectors or competitive meta heads, there's a bit more to it than the rush of the win or a potential monetary payout, which obviously doesn't exist. It's all virtual. Kafka isn't real, unfortunately. I'm upset about it too. So what's it like to actually play a gacha game then? Well, it's complicated. While the majority of these titles used to be turn-based RPGs with PNGs of anime girls, boot up a Hoyoverse title and you'll quickly notice that the genre has made quite a jump, with Genshin Impact's obvious comparison being Breath of the Wild. Set out into a vast, beautiful world with tons of enemies to fight and secrets to uncover as you progress through story missions, cutscenes, boss fights, and mini-games. Honkai Star Rail is then your Persona or Final Fantasy equivalent, and Zenless is a character-swapping ARPG that seems to move at lightning speeds. Yet the thread that keeps bringing me back to this discussion is that when player retention and revenue generation are at the heart of every mechanic and system in a video game, the finished product ends up being kinda bad. These games can be engaging in the most literal sense of the word, as they constantly spit out little gems and rewards to remind you of the gacha mechanic, but I often find that positive reinforcement loops, FOMO, and other shady tactics take precedence over interesting or difficult gameplay. I obviously can't speak on every game, as I've heard positive mumblings about Limbus Company and enjoyed the MMO-like raids of Dragalia Lost, but when it comes to any modern gacha that appears to emulate the AAA open world or RPG, they are always worse off for being gacha games. Threats of losing progress or permanent character deaths or difficult narrative choices or weapon break, basically any frictional concepts, do not exist. Even in titles with a semblance of strategy, RPG number systems take precedence over real progression, as characters don't evolve past the moves they have when you acquire them at level 1, and increasing their strength is a separate endeavor from main story quests or fun challenges. Despite the immense amount of work and artistry that goes into creating these fleshed out worlds and incredible set pieces, main story content is but a fraction of the intended experience. To artificially extend playtime and create the habits of a forever game, gacha games incorporate mindless grinding of repetitive tasks to strengthen your team. Your team needs to be strengthened to earn better rewards or participate in limited time challenges that, you guessed it, give you currency for upgrading your characters or doing more pulls. It's a vicious little cycle that can continue in the content droughts between major updates, an issue that many of these games struggle with since they aren't designed with the same infinite replayability that defines live service multiplayer. But hey, at least they're free, right? In acknowledging that gacha games aren't traditional gambling, and thus much trickier to discuss ethically, the most important distinction comes from a phrase many use to defend monetization: you can experience everything without spending a penny. Gacha games are very much video games, and they are technically free to play. There is no betting required to explore the sprawling world of Teyvat or witness Star Rail's storyline. However, even though you're not being charged an entry fee, it's nearly impossible to complete all of a gacha game's content without engaging with the gacha system, even if you just use free rewards. More importantly, it's fun. And the characters are hot. It's like that's where we got the name for the damn genre. Elemental interactions and team flexibility are often key parts of the experience, but very few characters can be unlocked simply through playing the game. To create desire to spend, a gacha game relies on far more than just advertisements, as the game itself is a living ad. Cutscenes, side quests, and events will constantly show off premium characters, establishing their personalities and place in the narrative while demonstrating how much cooler their abilities are than the mediocre ones you got for free. And hey look, you can even take them for a test drive and we'll give you a couple nickels for it. This is all to say that just because you don't literally gamble money doesn't mean there aren't insidious design elements at play. Remember Addiction by Design, the book I mentioned earlier? In it, Natasha Schull notes that many gambling addicts don't play to win. Rather, they become addicted to escaping the real world and entering a state called the zone. And I can't help but notice some similarities between live service retention techniques and the way Schull and industry consultants describe video gambling design.
The key is duration of play. I want to keep you there as long as humanly possible. That's the whole trick. That's what makes you lose.
Speaking from my own perspective, I don't like these games. I get consistently addicted and spend far too much time on them, even if I'm not having fun. But every once in a while, I'll see a positive review or some fan art for a new one and think to myself, wow, one of the best turn-based RPGs of the past decade? Maybe this one will be different, before blacking out for a couple days and waking up to fried dopamine receptors, an upset stomach, and a full team of meta characters. Even though I know how these games work, even having made multiple videos critiquing them in the past, even swearing off them time and time again, they still get me. They're designed to. In addition to gacha games showering rewards upon new players to make onboarding as easy as possible, there's a sense of intoxicating pseudo-productivity in being led through a trail of rewards that would baffle Pavlov himself, despite the reality of mashing buttons through repetitive dialogue and frictionless gameplay.
Oh, shiny! Ooh, sparkly!
These games are purpose-built to convince me that time spent earning fake money is more important than things I'd rather be doing, which also leads me to play them far more than I need to when researching and recording videos. I was reading through Addiction by Design while getting hooked on Zenless and Star Rail, so it was very surreal to see these ideas of optimizing time be expressed in such a similar way. The concept of video games having addictive potential potential has been around far longer than live service, as Schul even notes that video games are an apt point of comparison to gambling due to their focus on perfecting the zone over the thrill of winning money, and that casinos draw directly from video games to maximize time on device. Also, the second largest slot machine manufacturer in the world owns the studio behind Raid Shadow Legends, so that's a fun thing, right? Remember when I said that anime gambling is the tip of the iceberg here? Well, the main currency these games are after is your time, an idea that Orlando Woods explores in his 2 papers on gacha, both of which reference addiction by design while analyzing the complex ways in which players engage with these titles.
Whilst the zone is a space of immersion that is predicated on the exit from time for machine gamblers, for the players of gacha games, an alternative, almost reversed, playing logic can be observed. This involves the hyper-rationalization of time as a playing resource that is leveraged to circumvent the need for monetary investment in the gacha mechanic.
One of the key ideas behind Woods' research is that it's often unproductive to directly compare gacha games to real money gambling, instead focusing on the rationalization of actions that mirror gambling addiction, with the currency being time. Examples of this are my aforementioned feelings of productivity leading to unhealthy habits, new players speeding through the early game for a future payoff, and in-game achievements providing a constant sense of accomplishment. When gacha games become an intimate part of people's lives, whether that's cultivating connections with their favorite characters, getting invested in the story, or developing daily and weekly grinding routines, Woods suggests that the lines between gambling-like habits and passion for a piece of media can become blurred. While you can earn premium currency simply by playing, it is a carefully rationed amount that is in no way sufficient to unlock everything. After completing the main story,